Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the workshop. This is the cheap versus expensive distortion pedal build part 3, and today we are going to settle this thing. Now, I had originally intended to finish up the two preamp pedal build series. I wanted to do the last video this week, but the stupid speaker emulator isn't working. So anyway, we're going to finish up this cheap versus expensive series instead. I'm sure most of you figured out in the last video which one was which. For those of you who don't know yet, I'll tell you. The green pedal has all the expensive components in it. And one of the things I mentioned at the end of the last video, one of the things I wanted to try, was swapping out the transistors. I want to see how much of a difference that's really going to make. In my experience, from listening to these two transistors in the past, in a different circuit, so obviously that's going to make a difference, but the BC109 always had a little bit nicer, warmer, fuller sound to it than the 2N5088. Normally I would expect a very subtle difference between the two, but because it's a fuzz circuit and the transistors themselves are clipping quite a bit, especially on the lower gain settings, we may hear a pretty big difference. So we'll have to find out. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and swap out the transistors. I'm going to put, we're going to have BC109s in both the silver and green pedals and see how much of a difference that makes. Okay, first of all, let's have a little reminder of the difference between these two before I switch these transistors. Here's the silver one with the 2N5088s in it. And the green one with the BC109s. I've got the controls set exactly the same on both pedals, so the only differences you're hearing here are the differences in the components themselves. And again, notice that the green one, with all the expensive components in it, has definitely a lot more low-mid content, and it seems to me maybe a little bit smoother in the top end also. Definitely a lot more mid-range on that. Let me turn this reverb off. Okay, now let's hear the difference between a 2N5088 and a BC109. All the controls are still set the same on both pedals, so we'll see where that gets us. So, to my ears, there's still a lot more low-end and low-mids coming from the green pedal. I do think switching the BC109s in made quite a difference, though. I'm not hearing as much of a difference between these two anymore as I was before. So, I guess the BC109s are lending more of their character to this circuit than I expected. So, the only difference between these two now is the tropical fish caps and the diodes. So I want to try a little trick that I figured out a while back. I'll explain it on the whiteboard. Okay, so now we know the differences that we're still hearing between the two pedals comes down to the tropical fish capacitors and the different clipping diodes. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to actually go back to the 2N5088 transistors for the silver pedal. And instead of using more expensive components to get closer to the sound of the green pedal, I'm going to use a little trick that I learned a while back. This is a typical gain stage in a Big Muff and a number of other distortion pedals. You've got a blocking capacitor coming off of the collector of the transistor, and then off of that we've got the clipping diodes tied into the base. The size of this capacitor here determines what frequencies get through to these clipping diodes. And one of the reasons that those vintage diodes sound so nice and full on the low end is because they're actually they're less efficient. They don't let the lower frequencies through as easily as the newer diodes do. And so we're going to mimic the inefficiencies of those diodes by making this a smaller capacitor. And what that'll do is it'll actually block the lower frequencies from being clipped so that they make it through to the next stage. Now, if we just leave it like this and we just have a single smaller value resistor or capacitor here, then what's going to happen is we're going to have way too much low end, and it'll just be overpowering. So all we want to do is kind of mix in a little bit of that. So instead, what we'll do is we'll have a small value resistor here in parallel with our smaller capacitor. So now most of the low frequency content is still going to make it through this resistor to the clipping diodes, but this is going to hold back a little bit of it so that we get a little bit of a bump in the lows and low mids that makes it over to the next transistor stage. And we can tweak this resistor to get, you know, a wide range of low mid or low boost out of this stage. In fact, you could even put this on a switch, have something like this, another leg coming down here, and then a switch, so that you've basically got like a little fat boost switch on here. It would be really easy to implement something like this. But the value of this resistor and the value of this smaller capacitor are going to determine where that low-mid bump starts and how much you get out of it. So that's what we're going to do in the silver pedal, and I think it might actually get us closer to the sound of the green pedal than switching the transistors did. So let's find out. Now, I also wanted to mention, before I forget, I told you I've tried this trick in the past, and for some reason it does not work when the clipping diodes are in the ground shunt configuration. They have to be in a feedback loop in order for this to work. I'm not sure why. Okay, here we go. We've got the controls for both pedals set the same again. So let's start with the silver one. And the green one. Alright, I need to pick a better spot here so I can get to the controls more easily. So... well, I think that actually did more for us than changing out the transistors did. Let me try. Bring the treble up on the silver one a little bit. Wow, there's not much of a difference left anymore. Bring the bass down a tiny bit. Bring the treble up a tiny bit. Boy, I can't hear much of a difference at all anymore. Alright, I'm going to try turning the gain down a bit. About 4. More output. Let's turn the treble down slightly. from where I'm sitting, on certain settings, I can't hear a difference anymore. I think, if anything, at this point, the silver one actually has a little bit better clarity in the top end than the green one does. Which is kind of disappointing, because I really wanted to like the green one better. I've got the bass is a little higher on the silver one right now. Where's the treble? Treble is also, yeah, just slightly higher on the silver one. In the last video, as I mentioned at the end, the green one was the clear winner for me. I can't say that anymore. I think I actually like the silver one better. But that's just the silicon side. Let's try the germanium side and see if that does the same thing for us. Okay, so here's the germanium side. Same thing again. These two wires are going into where the blocking capacitor was mounted for the germanium diodes, and I only did this on the second clipping stage because I think that's where it's probably going to have the most influence. You know, you could certainly do this trick on both of them, but I don't think it's necessary. So here is the green one on the germanium side. Wow. Holy cow. That is really close. Let's turn the bass up on this a little bit. And turn the treble up a little bit. Bring the treble up a tiny bit more. That's scary close. I have to listen really hard. And again, I don't. You know, you guys are probably not going to be hearing everything that I'm hearing because this is not the world's greatest microphone. But this is really, really close now. I'm starting to prefer the silver one because I have to have the bass turned up a little bit more on the silver one than I do on the green one, but man, the top end clarity is just a little bit nicer on the silver one than it is on the green one. I'm really surprised by this. I did not expect, I mean, like I said, I've done this before, but in this circuit, I didn't expect it to make that much of a difference, especially since I'm only doing it to the second clipping stage. And it's really not, I mean, the mixing resistor that I've got in parallel with that smaller capacitor is so small that, you know, whatever differences are left, it could just be a matter of tweaking the value of that resistor. Maybe put a trim pot in there and you could dial in the exact sound of this one, but I don't think I'd want to, because right now I like the silver one better. I gotta play some more. The silver one just has better definition overall now. I think I'm done here. Well, honestly, part of me is disappointed. I mean, this just really burst a bubble for me because I have always really liked those tropical fish caps, and I really expected them to be just unbeatable in this. tweaking the bass and treble controls a little bit, I could get it in some cases to sound so close to the green one that I couldn't hear a difference anymore, and in other cases I thought it sounded better. I thought the high end was a little bit sweeter and clearer. I thought by comparison the green one at sometimes sounded a little bit muddy. So I can say without any doubt, at least for this circuit, it's not worth spending the extra money on the vintage components. I knew that I was going to be able to get a pretty close sound out of the silver one, but I was still thinking to myself, you know, when this series is over, I'm going to send one of these to my friend, and I'm going to keep the other one. Well, I'll probably put the expensive components in both of them. And no matter how close I get, I'm probably going to still prefer the vintage components. I've changed my mind. I'm going to keep the one that's got the cheap components in it because I actually like that better. There are still subtle differences. Again, I had to turn the bass up a little bit more on the silver one, but so what? You're going to be tweaking the tone controls anyway, and in most cases, when I got it close and I could still hear a difference, I preferred the silver one. So we're going to have to do this again. We have to have a rematch, obviously, because the circuit does make a big difference. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know what your thoughts were on this in the comments section below. Hit subscribe, like it if you like it, and we'll see you in the next video.